In a world where everything black is expected to be broken, discarded, or dependent, what if the solution we needed was already lying in the dirt? A child sleeping on a garbage heap, a mother cooking dinner over melting plastic, a street choking on smoke, but breathing defiance. They said Africa needed saving. They said Burkina Faso was the poorest of the poor. But Captain Ibrahim Traoré didn't ask for rescue. He saw the truth behind the trash and made a decision that would awaken a continent, not a program, not a loan, a resurrection. This is not war, he said. This is a coming back to life. In the hot heart of West Africa, where maps show poverty and outsiders see despair, a quiet revolution began with garbage. Because when the world throws you away, you either rot or rise. Burkina Faso chose to rise. Stay with us because this isn't just another story. It's the future our ancestors dreamed of. Subscribe and join us for an Africa that no longer bows its head, because this isn't just about garbage. It's about what happens when a nation ignored, underestimated, nearly erased looks at the ashes and sees possibility. And at the center of that possibility stood one man, not a king, not a prophet, a captain. His name, Ibrahim Traoré. And what he saw in the streets of Ouagadougou changed everything. Before there were headlines, before there were grants or reports or global praise, there was a man, a soldier, a street, and trash. Plastic bags clinging to fences like ghosts, rusted cans piled in gutters, smoke curling into the air like a quiet scream from the city's edge. To the world, it was filth, waste. But to Captain Ibrahim Traoré, it was survival. He stood in Ouagadougou, the city's pulse slow with despair, and didn't see garbage. He saw gold. He saw heat, energy, raw material. He saw a nation buried alive under what others had discarded. We will rebuild with what they throw away, he said. It wasn't just a quote. It was the cornerstone of a revolution. Burkina Faso had no oil fields, no billion-dollar tech parks, no shining ports, but it had garbage. And in Traoré's hands, that became enough. While other leaders wrote speeches begging for aid, he wrote policy for equipment. While others chased climate conferences, he walked the alleyways where smoke burned children's eyes. He didn't wait for permission. He declared independence not with guns, but with garbage bins. In early 2022, under his directive, Burkina Faso launched its most radical policy yet: transform waste into national wealth. No Western PR team, no UN blueprint, just a soldier with calloused hands and a people who'd had enough of being forgotten. The initiative began with a triple action: funding for localized recycling hubs, training programs for street collectors, government grants for innovation using scrap. It wasn't just about cleaning streets. It was about reclaiming value. Burning dumps became power stations. Plastic bottles became tiles for roofs. Rusty wires were stripped, melted, and sold to Asian markets. Within 1 year, Burkina Faso's waste economy generated over $20 million in internal value. That money didn't come from imports. It came from the hands of Burkinabe citizens, those once told they were too poor to matter. Captain Ibrahim, latest news spread not through tabloids, but through whispered pride in back alleys and busy markets. People said, he didn't save us. He made us see we could save ourselves. And that's what changed everything. This was not a PR campaign. This was a blueprint for rebirth. Burkina Faso's garbage wasn't just reprocessed. Its people were from abandoned to essential, from ignored to ingenious. At every turn, Traoré rejected the old narrative that help must come from abroad, that worth is imported, that hope wears a white suit and a Western passport. Instead, he asked his people to look down at the ground they walked on, the dirt that cut their feet, the bags stuck in trees, the metal poking from forgotten lots, and to see not shame, but strategy. And they did. In Bobo Dioulasso, a mechanic turned broken fans into battery-powered crop dryers. In Kaya, students rewired e-waste into solar phone chargers. In Dori, villagers turned tire scraps into cook stoves. A country that had long been defined by what it didn't have suddenly realized it had everything it needed if only it stopped waiting and started building. This is not a miracle. This is what happens when the people believe again. This is what happens when a leader doesn't make promises, he makes space for vision, for work, for the power born from trash. But revolutions are never built by one man alone. They are carried by the hands that show up first and stay longest. And in Burkina Faso, before policies were signed, before cameras arrived, it was the women who moved. Quietly, powerfully, not to ask for change, but to become it. Before any office signed a policy, before any grant was approved, it was the women who showed up, not with microphones, not with degrees, but with gloves, sacks, and a will forged in fire. From the smoke-filled edges of Ouagadougou to the backstreets of Bobo Dioulasso, it was women, single mothers, widows, grandmothers who turned shame into inventory. They didn't wait for approval. They moved because they had already waited long enough. They formed crews in silence, organized door-to-door waste pickups, learned with bare hands and bare feet how to sort plastics by grade, by weight, by use. They built supply chains where there were none. They stitched dignity out of waste. In one alleyway, 10 women began the Recycle Fee Collective some couldn't read. None had bank accounts, but they could work. Today, they are more than 150 strong, exporting mats, handbags, and school backpacks stitched from old plastic bags. Yes, the same ones that once choked goats and clogged drains. Their products now sit in boutique shops from Dar es Salaam to Abidjan. Their hands made something out of nothing, and in doing so, rewrote what it means to lead in Burkina Faso. They didn't just clean streets, they cleaned the narrative. The government saw it and responded. For the first time in generations, investment chased women, not the other way around. Small grants, business training, legal registration support, tax incentives. But here's the deeper truth. They didn't need saving. They were already rich. Rich in resilience, rich in resourcefulness, rich in refusal to stay erased. We didn't ask for a seat at the table. One leader said, "We built our own out of recycled wood." They became business owners, taxpayers, trainers, council members. They taught job courses to the next generation. Their kids didn't inherit garbage. They inherited grit. This was not Western feminism. This was Black womanhood born in ash and rising in rhythm. Not in hashtags, but in hustle. Not in TED Talks, but in tenacity. And the world noticed. Delegations came to observe these women-led cooperatives. NGOs took notes. Journalists filmed. But nothing captured the soul of the movement, because that can't be exported. It's something you feel when you watch a mother with a baby on her back and a sack on her head sort bottles at dawn and smile because today she signs her own paycheck. She does not just represent progress. She is the economy. What these women proved is something the world has tried to forget. That when Black women lead, nations follow. And that revolution does not always march. Sometimes it picks up a plastic bag and walks door to door. Their success created ripple effects. Young girls saw what was possible. Girls who once walked 5 miles for water now walk into workshops heads high, eyes forward, and ask about production quotas, export permits, business plans. Because when a mother becomes an owner, her daughter inherits possibility, not pity. Burkina Faso's trash revolution may have been sparked by a soldier, but it was built by women who didn't wait. And the fire they started didn't stop with them. It spread to the feet of the youth, the sons and daughters who had been told for decades to leave, to flee, to dream elsewhere. But now, for the first time in a generation, the ground beneath them held promise, and they ran toward it, with code, with courage, with conviction. They weren't looking for a future abroad. They were building one at home. For too long, the only story told about Africa's youth was one word: out. Out of jobs, out of choices, out of the continent. Go to Europe. They were told, go to America. Go anywhere but here. But something changed. Not through slogans, through trash. As garbage turned into fuel, pride, and paychecks, young people didn't flee. They built. They rolled up sleeves, built their own tools, skipped despair. Because for the first time, hope was hiring. Meet Green Faso, a youth-led app that connects households with waste collectors in real time. Think Uber, but for garbage. Families now schedule pickups from their phones, track recyclables, earn discounts on groceries for doing the right thing. This isn't charity. This is tech with teeth. Designed by local coders who once patched phones under mango trees, now writing systems that power a cleaner economy. And that's just the beginning. In Ouagadougou's vocational schools, students now build solar-powered incinerators that burn plastic without releasing toxins. In rural towns, teenage mechanics convert used tires into biofuel that powers mills. Young hackers create drones to map illegal dump sites. Environmental data is being used by street youth with smartphones who a year ago were unemployed and today are field engineers. This isn't theory. This is transformation. One young woman, 23, built her own solar dehydrator to preserve farm produce. Another turned cooking oil into clean fuel, selling it to roadside restaurants who now cook with reused oil instead of dumping it into soil. These aren't projects, they're proof. And the results? Youth unemployment in key districts dropped by 15% in just 24 months. Why? Because opportunity was local. Because dignity was no longer imported. Training centers now offer classes in eco-manufacturing, biodegradable product design, environmental logistics. Every skill earned doesn't just produce a product. It produces a citizen, one who doesn't beg for a seat, but builds their own, because that's what this generation is doing, authoring their own future. Managing waste isn't dirty work, said a 22-year-old engineer. It's nation building. Across Burkina Faso, you see it. Young men running fleets of waste trikes, young women managing compost cooperatives, college graduates launching AI systems to optimize collection routes, and none of it funded by foreign aid. All of it powered by pain turned purpose. They're not sidekicks in someone else's story. They are the story. And here's the most important part. They are not leaving. They are staying to build, to lead, to clean up the mess the world left behind. Because they've realized something powerful. If we don't see the future here, we will never see it anywhere. And if you believe this is what Africa needed all along, say amen in the comments below. But this movement wasn't just social. It wasn't just economic. It became something larger, a fight for survival on a planet in crisis. While world leaders drafted emissions reports and debated targets, Burkina Faso was already doing the work. With no luxury, no delay, just tools and truth. While presidents flew across oceans to sign climate pledges, while billionaires bought carbon credits to ease their guilt, Burkina Faso got to work in the dirt. With no applause, no luxury summit rooms, no green bonds, just smoke, soil, and a choice. A choice to fight climate change with what the world throws away. And fight they did. In just 2 years, the country cut over 100,000 tons of CO2 emissions annually, not by buying fancy systems, but by building grassroots solutions. Plastic that once burned in open air is now compressed, repurposed, or transformed into bricks. Banana peels and food scraps no longer rot. They become rich compost that brings life back to cracked earth. Tires once dumped into rivers now spin turbines, fuel stoves, and power rice mills. Over 40% of urban waste in Burkina Faso is now either recycled or composted, a number many developed nations still struggle to reach. This is not idealism. This is climate engineering from below. Climate change isn't stopped by awareness, said a university student in the Ouagadougou Solar Lab. It's stopped by tools. We are building them, and those tools are saving lives. In rural provinces, farmers now apply compost made from city waste. The result? Crop yields rose by 30%. That's not hope. That's a harvest. No more begging for fertilizer from abroad. The soil is being healed by its own people using what was once labeled useless. Old cooking oil is now collected, purified, and reused. This alone has reduced the pollution of water systems by over 40% in key areas. And yes, the tech is rising too. University labs, run by barefoot visionaries, are testing solar-powered incinerators that reduce plastic volume by 80% without releasing poison. These are not machines shipped from the West. They are built, wired, tested, and refined in Burkina Faso with metal scraps and street smarts. Even the layout of waste collection changed. Traoré's administration didn't centralize it. They decentralized it, micro-hubs across cities and villages, so no region was left behind. And that's what made the model strong. When the global north talks climate, they talk big: satellites, nuclear fusion, international accords. But in Burkina Faso, the solution is simple. Do more with what you already have. It's not glamorous, it's gritty, and it works. Burkina Faso latest news now appears in European climate bulletins, not as a case study in crisis, but as a blueprint in courage. At a recent Nairobi Circular Economy Summit, Burkina Faso was listed among Africa's top 5 climate innovation nations, alongside economies 10 times its size. And the world took notice. The World Bank, the European Union, green tech investors from Silicon Valley. They're not flying in to give aid. They're flying in to learn. Because unlike carbon markets that reward polluters for reducing damage, Burkina Faso rewards communities for creating value. The message is clear. Climate resilience doesn't start in Geneva. It starts in the gutter. where someone once saw trash and decided to see something else. This isn't a climate campaign. This is Black innovation at full force. And as the numbers rose, the emissions cut, the jobs created, the land restored, so too did the eyes of the world. Not in pity, not in charity, but in respect. Because something was happening in Burkina Faso that defied every map, every metric. A new kind of power was forming, not from oil or weapons, but from will. And now the world was watching. This wasn't supposed to happen. A nation with no ocean, no oil, no Silicon Valley. Burkina Faso wasn't meant to lead anything. But trash changed that, because when the world ignored them, they stopped waiting. And when they stopped waiting, they started building. Today, Burkina Faso doesn't just manage its waste, it exports the future. Recycled bricks are being used in low-income housing. Fashion accessories made from upcycled fabric and plastic are now sold across West Africa. Compost-based fertilizers, created from kitchen waste, are shipped to neighboring nations. Trash became infrastructure. Trash became currency. Trash became soft power, and the world noticed. Delegations from Ghana, Niger, Senegal, and even Europe have arrived not to give aid, but to learn. They walk through the recycling hubs. They photograph the decentralized microcenters. They ask questions not about charity, but about scalability. Why? Because this isn't a foreign import. It's a homegrown model, a model built by Burkinabe hands, sharpened by hardship, fueled by necessity. A model that says, we don't need your solution. We built our own. Under Traoré's leadership, the government created mobile apps for mapping waste routes, cooperative export licenses for women-led groups, and revenue-sharing models for informal collectors. The logic was simple. If the system doesn't exist, build one that fits your people. And so they did. Captain Ibrahim latest news now trends not because of controversy, but because a soldier helped an entire country stand taller, not with guns, but with garbage bins. At the Nairobi Circular Economy Summit, Burkina Faso was named one of Africa's top 5 climate innovation nations, standing shoulder to shoulder with giants, not by begging for a seat, but by proving they built their own table. And this story doesn't stop at the border. The ECOWAS bloc, West Africa's regional coalition, is actively discussing how to replicate the model continent-wide. Because Burkina Faso didn't just fix a system, they rewrote the rules. They said, women will lead, youth will invent, trash will teach, and the world will listen. This is no longer a national story. It's a continental invitation to every underestimated nation, to every overlooked people, to every place told, you have nothing. Burkina Faso answers, we have something no one else dared to try, and that is power. But this story, this revolution born from trash, was never meant to stay inside borders. It was never just about Burkina Faso. It was always about all of us, about every forgotten street, every discarded soul, every nation told, you are nothing. Because now we know better. Now we have proof. And now we ask, what will you do with what the world throws away? They called it waste. We called it the beginning. Because when there was nothing, no help, no praise, no attention, Burkina Faso chose to rise, not in someone else's image, but in its own fierce silhouette. Today, on the edges of Ouagadougou, the ground no longer smells of smoke. It smells of soil, living soil. Soil that once cracked from drought now holds seeds, seeds planted by hands that once scavenged. The mothers who once dug through trash now sign paychecks. The youth who once dreamed only of escape now design blueprints. The girls who once watched silently now teach workshops. What changed? Not the weather, not the world. Them, the people of Burkina Faso, made a decision. We are not broken. We are not your burden. We are builders. Trash was just the medium. The message was always dignity. This story is not about recycling. It's about remembering who we are. It's about a people so often discarded, finally declaring, we never threw ourselves away. So now we ask you, not just as viewers, but as brothers and sisters, what is your waste? What have you been taught to discard in yourself, in your homeland, in your community? Because somewhere in that pile is a spark, waiting, watching, wanting to rise. And when it does, the world will ask, how did they do it? And you'll answer, we stopped waiting. Burkina Faso lit the way with garbage. What's stopping the rest of us? Africa Rise. If this story moved something in your chest, don't scroll past. Like, share, speak, subscribe, because they hid our history long enough. Let's speak our future out loud. Thank you for being here. We'll see you in the next story, the kind they still don't want you to hear.